Hey, what's up, everybody? You know what time it is. Your boy Jeffrey L. Boney for another hot edition of Real Talk Junkies Live here on the Forward Times Facebook and Instagram pages. So excited for you to join us on today. We got another great show, man. A lot of great conversation. We just started June 1st, man. So we're in the month of Juneteenth. We're going to be celebrating Juneteenth all month long, but especially on June 19th. It's a national federal holiday now. So some of y'all that was working on Juneteenth, now you're gonna get paid. At least most of you. Some of them, like me, so, I don't get a day off. But nonetheless, it's gonna be exciting to once again celebrate the Juneteenth holiday. There's a lot of festivities planned. In the city of Houston, the greater Houston area, of course, in my city, Most City, Missouri City, Texas, we're gonna have our annual Juneteenth celebrations. They're going to be week-long activities. There's going to be a major parade and, of course, concert and various other things. But definitely want you to participate in something. If it's something Juneteenth related, whether it's in Houston, whether it's in Pearland, whether it's in Missouri City, wherever it is in the greater Houston area, if you can get to a Juneteenth celebration, make sure you do, because it's an extremely important holiday, something that we definitely want to continue to commemorate, because freedom is not free, and it costs a lot for us to be free on today. And speaking of free, you think about the fact that a lot of people are incarcerated. Mass incarceration is at an all-time high still. And I just get sick to my stomach when I see these stories come out, these articles come out that talk about somebody was in jail for umpteen years, 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. Saw even somebody was in jail for over 50 years just to find out that they were incarcerated for no apparent reason, that they were hoodwinked, bamboozled, that they was taken advantage of by the system, whether it be a prosecutor, a judge, a law enforcement official, withholding evidence, got the wrong person. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, honestly, can you imagine doing so many years of your life having to be subjected to somebody, not having your true freedom, all because somebody screwed up, because somebody got the wrong person, somebody made either a mistake or they knew what they were doing? I mean, that's jacked up, man. And so I know it's important for individuals. I mean, the court system and judicial system and the prison system is there, and it should be there for only hardened criminals or people that deserve to be in prison. But you got a lot of people in prison that should not be there. And somebody joining me today to talk about preventing individuals from going to prison, especially when you think about the level of crime that we're starting to see in this country here of late. Not only interracial types of crimes, just white on black or black on white or whatever the case, but a lot of intra-racial, black on black, and different other types of, whether it's Hispanic on Hispanic or Asian on Asian, because it ain't just mutually exclusive to black people. I want to have somebody come on and not only talk about that, but talk about the mental illness aspect of it. What leads a person to want to commit not only just some crimes, but violent crimes and various other things, and how we can prevent those individuals from going down that path, particularly our young people. Joining me today is an expert in the field, somebody that has been doing this for over 30 years in the space, and has no plans to stop anytime soon. He is a master in his craft, and he is always welcome here on Real Talk Junkies. I'm talking about none other than Reginald Gordon, Operation OG1 in the building.
What's going on?
How you doing, man? Welcome to Real Talk today, man. Always good to have you on.
Thank you.
All right, so before we kind of get started on some of the things that I talked about, we always have real conversation. Just tell people a little bit about yourself briefly, and then we can get into it.
Well, first of all, Brother Boner, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be back in your space and be able to give my presentation and my outlook and why I do the work that I do and why I do the work that I do. I've been in this field going on, you said 30, it's going on like 40 years now.
Oh man,
I started shortchanged. Yeah, you shortchanged. This been a rough ride, but it's been a ride. It's been a ride that I've been blessed to do, because, you know, as a young man, I come from what most young men come from, but we, you know, I'm not here to try to soften this thing down, to try to put coatings on it. I come from an area where I come out of a household with a loving mother and a domestic violent father. And as I was raised up in this household with a mother that tried to do everything she can to raise 6 beautiful children, my father had what his issues were that we didn't know as a young person coming out the deep part of Sunnyside, and him trying to struggle to keep food on the table for 6 children and a loving mother. And my father, as I look back at his life, he was only the product of his father that never was given the training, never was given the treatment, never was given the therapy. And my father turned out to be what a lot of fathers in a lot of stories that I hear became an alcoholic. And when he went to work and got full of that worldly mistreatment that he went at work, he brought all that negative pain and negative energy home. And when he got around people that he loved and say loved and was comfortable with, he took all that anger and frustration out on my mother and his children. And I grew up in this domestic household, not understanding why I have 2 beautiful mother and father, but my father had pains that he didn't know how to deal with other than spread it to his children, spread it to my mother. So it was time that I woke up in the morning as the oldest son, seeing my mother with 2 black eyes, seeing my mother with a busted lip. But my mother loved the family and the family structure so much, my mother would cover and protect my father. Oh, your dad just had a little too much to drink. He gonna be all right. And I'm looking at my mother. I can't hardly see, but my mother would always tell us, like most mothers did, and that I think, whatever goes on in this house stays in this house. Don't take my business to the school. Don't tell them people at school what goes on. So I was a young man, oldest, felt embarrassed, felt ashamed because I couldn't protect my mother. So what I did, stand up at night, the school was my safe zone. So I went to school and did what most young men did. I went to the back of the room because the teacher at that time, if I showed up, signed my attendance sheet that I was in the class, I got credit for that day. And she got credit for that day. It didn't really matter whether I could read or write.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I was making the attendance count go up by me being present. So I was pushed through 1st grade. I was pushed through 2nd grade. I was pushed through 3rd grade. By the time I got to the 6th grade, I figured out I couldn't read and write.
Wow.
So at that moment, my young boyhood was transforming. By the time I'm getting into 6th and 7th grade, I'm transforming into this teenager finna go to middle school. And my eyes got off the basketball court and started looking at girls. So my hormones were running wild. I had to impress myself because I wasn't comfortably in love with myself because I had a low self-esteem that I was hiding. So I did what most young men did because I didn't want to get embarrassed in front of the school young people that I dealt with. So once I was put on the front line to read and write in front of the young people that are my peers, and they looked at me with the suspicious eyes, and I looked uncomfortable and I felt uncomfortable, I ran and did what most young men that I felt would do. I ran to the street where I felt comfortable with the same kind of people that I felt comfortable with.
All right, before you go further, because I know we're finna get deeper into this situation, but I want to go back to the household situation. So you growing up in this house, you're seeing this domestic violence take place. Did you know what you were witnessing? I mean, was it something that registered with you, like that this is not right?
Well, you know, I could feel the energy and the pain of fear in the building. You know what I'm saying? I could see the blood. I could see the frightening in my mother's face. You know, I could hear the screaming, please. And so these things.
How old are you at this time?
I'm around the age of 10, 11 years old.
Okay,
so I'm definitely connecting that this is not right. This is not comfortable. You know what I'm saying? Because my mother, her love for us was a different love than my father. Because my father, you could tell that he was never given this kind of bonding and love and caressing. So, you know, he was.
So some people would call that as an excuse. They say, oh, that's just an excuse.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's an excuse. It's the passed on behaviors that my father never liked. Yeah, and I learned that as I grew older, that my father was just only the product of his father. His father never taught him how to be a man. So he went into a relationship with a mother. At that time, my mother was forced to marry him because he had 2 women pregnant at the time. And my mother was underage. My mother was underage, so he forced to marry my mother because she was underage or either go to jail. So that was a forced relationship that he never wanted to really be in because he never showed his worthy as a father growing up. And I learned all these different things as I grew older, and I had to reach back and not hold that against him on why he acted the way he acted, because I eventually found out I became the same product he was.
So what you're telling me is that you actually resented him.
Yes.
And you harbored this anger
Right.
in your heart towards him.
Right.
And is that why what we're about to go into
Exactly.
relative to your teenage years and you acting out, you believe it was because of that relationship with your father?
I believe I'm truly, after all the training I done went through, after all the studies I done looked back at, I became the product of what my father was. You know what I'm saying? And I was always told that and reinforced that through fact, you just like your daddy, you're gonna turn out to be just like your dad. And I eventually turned out like my dad. I eventually became an alcoholic, I became an abusive person, and I became one that really didn't understand life, and I hated life because I hated myself. So I carried my life out in no direction, but I was always harboring behind the mask the pain of me not knowing how to read and write. You know what I'm saying? So I carried this energy of pain and I covered it up like most young men do today. We harbor and we cover up our pain, we cover up our agony, and we cover up the secrets that we don't want nobody to see.
Yeah.
So I walked through life on those journeys until I turned 16. That's when my life hit rock bottom, because by the time I hit 16, I hadn't already got involved with what you call the street life, gang life, you know, calling ourselves the Southwest Gorillas and all that kind of behavior. Being a part of a group of young men that had the same feelings that they didn't know how to express, and we expressed our feelings through violence, we expressed our feelings through anger, and that's what as young men that I can remember looking back at my life, that's how I got back at the world, and I got back at my family, and definitely myself, the person that I truly knew that I didn't understand and I hated. So therefore, by the time of 16, I caught 4 aggravated robbery cases, and by the time I was 16 with these 4 aggravated robberies in a gang called the Southwest Gorilla Gang, and the court systems at that time, back in the early 70s, took me in as a juvenile. They certified me as a juvenile. They gave me 4 50-year sentences, and they sentenced me to prison with 4 50-year sentences.
Hold on. I just want to make sure that RTJs are hearing this correctly, because I know you're talking a little passionately and fast. Yes, I want to be clear. You said 4 50-year sentences. So I know how to multiply. That's 200 years.
Yes, at the age of 16.
Now sometimes they give you these consecutive, like right. You can basically serve concurrent.
Yeah, they didn't do me like that.
They gave you full 200.
They gave me full 200 years
as a juvenile.
As a juvenile,
at
16 years old.
At 16 years of age.
They certified me at 16. I was one of the first young men in the Harris County courthouse to be given 4 consecutive 50-year robberies.
All right, well, let's go back though. Okay, so let's go back to what got you those 4 50-year aggravated assault sentences.
Okay.
What actually brought you to that point?
Well, I in the lifestyle that I chose to be a part of with this group of young men that I felt comfortable with, that spoke the same language that I spoke, that had nothing other than the purpose of life of trying to bring pain on other people, because we was people that was hurting ourselves and didn't know how to express our pain. We was out robbing people. So we in the midst of doing these robberies, we robbed a restaurant on Telephone Road at that time, and one of the young men that I was with, it was 6 of one of them was shot. We ran from the police, and they chased us all the way down. It was Alameda at the time, and before they made it to 288, and they chased us in the field, and they pulled us out the field, and I ended up going into jail. And from that course on, I ended up, like I said, was certified as a teenager.
As an adult?
As a teenager. Well, they certified me as an adult. You know what I'm saying? I was a 16-year-old, they certified me as an adult at 16.
Wow. So listen, the other 3 individuals,
right?
You say one of them got shot.
One of them got shot.
Shot dead, or
they killed him? You know what I'm saying? Him, Joe.
How old was he?
I think Joe was like in his late 20s. You know what I'm saying? So it was older guys that I hung up with. He was in his late 20s, about 25.
So he was shot and killed by the police.
Shot and killed by the police.
All right, and then the other 2 gentlemen?
The other 2 gentlemen, they plea bargained out. They plea bargained out for like 35 years. So by me being the youngest at the time, I was given bad advice, because my mother that loved me so well, she took the house, she took the money and gathered some money and paid a lawyer. And what them lawyers did to my mother, they promised my mother that he juvenile, they're gonna give me probation, so don't worry about him. He was the youngest of the crowd, so you just pay me this money. We're gonna go through court. We're gonna take it to trial. So I'm convinced that my mother had the right lawyer, because I didn't know nothing about the law at the time. I'm just at the hand and mercy of the courts and the lawyer that my mother hired. So we went to court, went to trial, and eventually by me not plea bargaining out, that was another mark against me because I didn't plea out. They took me to trial, and I went to trial. All the evidence came out, and eventually they instead of the judge sentence me, let the jury sentence me, and the jury sentenced me to, at that time, young man, a school dropout. They gave me 50 years count 1, 50 years count 2, 50 years count 3, 50 years count 4 to be served in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
Wow. So this was in the 70s?
70.
So we're talking about the 1970s. I'm asking that for a reason,
Right.
because it's going to bring us full circle to our overall conversation. But so at 16 years of age, you get hit with 200 years.
200 years.
And this is going to the pen.
Yes, prison.
To the penitentiary, not to the city jail.
This was Ferguson Union, one of the roughest, toughest young units that you could go on back in the 70s. I'm saying heal the fire. I'm saying they had so many messages that you heard about Ferguson Unit. Either you went to Ferguson Unit or you went to the Clemens Unit right here in Brazos County. And Ferguson Unit, I'm saying from teenager to 21, they kept you on Ferguson and they shipped you off there. But Ferguson was, it was like burning hell at that time.
So what kind of prisoners was at the Ferguson?
All Ferguson had your aggravated offenders, your hardcore aggravated young offenders at Ferguson, to where people were serving heavy time, anywhere from 20 years on up at Ferguson. You know what I'm saying? So
what kind of? We talking about
robbery,
murder.
Yeah. I'm saying rapists. It was just hardcore criminals.
So at 16 years of age,
they got me in there with hardcore criminals.
You up in there with people doing life.
Life. I had life. One dude had 130 years. 240 years. You had people in there from around the state of Texas, because at that time, and still this time, Texas had that motto, don't mess with Texas. Mm-hmm. So Texas tough at that time. We still picking cotton out there in the prison system on Ferguson. So that's where they had all the cotton pickers on the Ferguson Unit at that time. So
they had you picking cotton for free.
Young people for free, picking plenty of cotton. You had to pick 100 pounds before lunch and 100 pounds after lunch.
And what happened if you did?
You stayed out there. You stayed out there till you got it. You know what I'm saying? So Ferguson Unit was made sure that they had some of the roughest prison guards. And you had the bill attendants and the tail rows and the lead rows and your strikers, the beat 'em up boys that kept you in line if you didn't pick your cotton. And you're saying what I did, because I still had, when I first got there, I was a young man with attitude. I was mad at myself. I was mad at the world. I had given up on life. You know what I'm saying? I had made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to work in that field. So I went out there a couple of times, and I seen my hand blistering up. I seen I couldn't work in the sun, and I just threw my Aggie down, and I just, for that by me throwing my Aggie down and refused to work.
What's an Aggie?
A garden hoe,
okay.
But it's a huge garden hoe with a head on it about that big, to make sure you chop all the grass and turn over the dirt while you're there. So by me refusing to work, they threw me on the back of a cart and they took me into it. And for my first 4 years for refusing to work in prison, I stayed in solitary confinement.
So that means that you was by yourself
underground. They kept me in there
23 hours
23, 1 hour a day.
You
they taught me how to play basketball, to stretch and whatever. And that depends how the guards felt and how my attitude was. Because if they came and they didn't feed me right, I would go off on them, throw the plate back at them. So, it depends on them, because I had already made my mind up. I was in that suicidal role on how do I get rid of myself.
So you basically, at this point, while you were your first several years in prison, you still had this hardcore mentality. Nobody could tell you nothing, and you really didn't care about your life.
I was on the zero tolerance when it comes to trying to savage what little life that I thought I had. I was at the hopeless state of mind where suicide was the best answer for me at the time while I was there.
Did you try to commit suicide?
Oh, several times in solitary confinement. I failed twice, matter of fact. You know what I'm saying? They rushed me out of there. They rushed me to the infirmary. You know what I'm saying? They filled me with fluids and got me back up to grade and throw me right back in there. So it was just that life that I was, that's in now, sweating, feeling embarrassed for not only myself, but what I done brought up on my family, because one of the strongest soldiers I can ever remember, and the reason why I survived that lifestyle is the support of my mother. If I didn't have my mother's support, I know I wouldn't have never left prison at the time that I was in there. So yeah, my mother is a big plus in my life, and the reason why I survived that lifestyle.
So you take us back and let's talk about your very first day.
Okay.
When you first arrived at the Ferguson Union, what was that first day like?
Well, when you get in there, first day when I hit there, they take you in there. You go through. They take your clothes. They give you your prison clothes while you're there, and let you go to shower. When you stand on the wall, you probably stand on the wall. Probably at that time, you stand on the wall. If you got there at 10 o'clock that day, you probably didn't get off that wall to like 8, 9 o'clock that night before they assign you to a different cell block. So once I got in the cell block, you get in the day room, you can already see inmates sizing you up. You can see inmates whispering about you. But you see people in there because you from the street. You see people in there. You know what I'm saying. So by me staying in the county jail so long, I'd already met young men that was in the Harris County jail that went before me on the jail that seen me when I got there, and they kind of get you there. If they really know you, they get you there and lace you up, if you wouldn't. So a couple of them got me in there and laced me up on what to be expected, what to look for, and how to do my time when I got there. So I had some good people there when I got there that really gave me the ropes and the ins and outs on how to survive once I got into prison. But I was the kind of person I had a self-hate and a self-destructive mindset at that time, because like I said, I was at the mind frame of hopelessness that I'm not going to do this time. Whatever I need to do to get out of here, I was going to do something, and I was too cowardly to do to myself. How do I make somebody else kill me when I was too cowardly to kill myself? So that's the kind of lifestyle you build yourself up to while you're there. So that's where I was at mindset-wise when I first got.
So when did you say 4 years or so you were in solitary?
Solitary.
So when did you have a shift, though? What brought about a shift in your? So
You ready?
The question was relative to when did you have the shift?
Well, a couple of years after being in there and, going through some reading and, doing self-education, reading Bible, reading the Quran, you know what I'm saying? They was able to give me the books. And while I was in there, they gave me that book that most brothers in prison get, you know what I'm saying? Autobiography of Malcolm X. You know what I'm saying? That's a powerful book that most brothers, if you admit it, have saved thousands of brothers' lives while they've been in prison. I'm reading Autobiography of Malcolm X. And his life was so familiar in the same way my lifestyle was lived, you know what I'm saying? 7th, 8th grade dropout, you know what I'm saying, went to the streets, tried to get their life together, and and connected to find out, because I never knew who I was. I was raised up in a family that didn't have a black connection, and I had no clue of what I was connected to. So the sense in the book of reading, understanding, and taking this journey and learning how to read while I was in solitary through Malcolm X, I connected, and I wanted to do something different with my life. I made promises like most brothers do while they're in jail. I want to do this here. I want to connect. If I ever got out of prison, I'm going to change my life around, you know what I'm saying? And I did. I came up with a plan while I was in solitary. I came up with the plan. I put it down on paper, and I kept writing it and kept imagining how it was going to be once I got out of solitary. And once I was released from solitary, I went to the ward and I went to the chaplain and I said, look here, I got this plan on bringing young people in here to let them see how the life of prison is and keep them from coming here. And they looked at me and they looked at my plan. The warden told me, no, we can't do this here. But the chaplain took a look at it. And the chaplain said, let's look at that and see what we can do. And eventually we started putting this program together. We first called it In Reach. You know what I'm saying, and bring young people into the chapel's office to sit them down, let the inmates come into the chapel office and talk to them to try to give them some insight on how to avoid the prison lifestyle. All of a sudden, Austin newspapers came in, and they did a photograph, because the young people that they brought, they found out that the recidivism rate of the young people that they brought and let the inmates talk to them was not returning back to the juvenile detention center. That was a big shock to them. So that became a real big push to where they wanted to start bringing more in. So I put the program together, and I eventually put the program. It's called the program Scared Straight. So we put together. I put together the program Scared Straight. HBO.
Now, some of y'all probably remember Scared Straight.
Yeah.
From back in the day, but you know, this is the true originator of Scared Straight.
I put together Scared Straight, and I put the plan together, and I took it to the ward, and the ward was liking it because, you know, the counties was calling them because the program that the Austin Telegraph come photographed it, and the families was asking for it. So we started doing it every Saturday, and then it picked up. HBO picked it up, and next thing you know, we doing all the little counties in the little Huntsville area. Then all of a sudden they wanted me to train other units. I started training other inmates on other units to do the program. And before you know it, this program took off. Before you left, it lasted at least 15 years before I got out of prison. So I took it for the rest of that way, training inmates around the city, the state, on how to do the program. But to be a part of the program, I knew it's going to take to protect something that was important, that was changing people's lives. What we had the requirement of the inmates that was wanting to get in this program, you had to get back involved in school. So, you know, and a lot of people was letting the inmates get themselves back involved in school. It was boosting up the AA, NA programs in the prison system, because this was something that the inmates wanted to be involved in, because a lot of times it gave them a sense of purpose and why you was in prison, of giving back into the community. So that program became a very powerful program. You know, I remember back in the late 80s, I brought in Brother Charles X. White. We did the first town hall meeting in the prison system with the warden, with the chaplain, with the judges. We did the first in Texas town hall meeting in a prison on dealing with the Scared Straight program. I was able to put together a program that branched out, where inmates would come out of there. They put together, it's called Kick It, where inmates were leaving, going to the school. So that program and the roots of it branched out. And I mean, it saved thousands and thousands of people's lives. And that program alone gave me the power to be able to write back to the courts to get my time ran concurrent, to where I was able to get all that 50 years concurrent to 150-year sentences. And eventually, over a period of time, I eventually was able to write the judge, send that information to it, and they gave me a parole after doing 20 years in prison, because of the work that I had started doing in prison. So, but the power of that program, what it done, even with the late 80s, I had my youngest brother was killed here in Hiram Clark. And by me being a part of that program, they even let me come home on a furlough to my brother's funeral. And at my brother's funeral, at the furlough, I met my daughter for the first time, because when I left at the age of 16, I had a young lady pregnant when I went to prison. She had just told me about 2 weeks, a month before I went to prison, that she was pregnant. And I met my daughter for the first time. So, you know, that was another big boost that kept me seeking to want to do better, to get out of there. So all these different things happened in my life to where I was able to get myself together, get my GED while I was there, go on to go to college. And once I was released, I didn't go back into it. I knew I had this field set up, that I had cushion and built up relationships all around the state on the program I built in prison. But I wanted to go and didn't want to come back to Houston, because I didn't want to lean on my family. Once I got here, I moved and paroled to a town called Temple, Texas. I went to Temple, Texas. I became what you call a car porter at first. I got a job working at a car shop, you know, Phantom, Volkswagen, Suzuki, washing cars. I'd say, and getting a little, you know, not too much from minimum wage payment, but I had a little apartment, and I was making this money as a car porter. And after I'd been there 6 months to a year, I had to gift the gab. I knew I could sell people cars, because I watched the car salesman. I paid eye and I focused on them. And eventually, over a 6-month period, when a job came open to be a car salesman, I didn't come in dressed as the porter that morning. I come in with my suit and tie like the salesman did. And the manager asked me, "Where you going?" I told the manager, "I'm here to apply for the job." You know what I'm saying? He looked at me. I said, "Well," he said, "Well, you look like you gave me an interview." I passed the interview. Within the first year, as I was the car salesman at Phantom, Volkswagen, Suzuki, I became what you call car salesman of the year, because I had a gift of knowing how to build relationships, knowing how to meet and greet customers, and on that alone gave me the power to get people to feed into what I was selling. So I stayed in that for like 5 years. I went on, but my passion, my love was always working with young people, because I made a commitment. If I got out of prison, I would always dedicate my life to dealing with young people. So I eventually moved from Temple, moved to Houston, started, got me an apartment, moved with my mother once upon a time. Then I started my own program here in Houston called Operation Outreach, OG1. And why did I put this word OG1 in? At the time in the 90s, early 90s, we knew that in Houston, the Crips, the Bloods, Southwest Cholos, Yellowstone Crips, all these boys were banging hard. And Houston was out of control in the 90s, 94. That's when prison, predators thing was coming out with the young black men as predators. So I had to put a phase in how do I capture young men to want to listen to me? So I put my program together, mapped it out. Operation Outreach OG1. OG1 only means the original group 1 that I started while I was in prison. So that name alone captured young men to ask me, OG1, what do that mean? My job from there is to give them the game on how I survived in the life of prison to become the person I am today. So I took that program, I connected around the state with all the different relationships I built up while I was in prison doing that Scared Straight program. And I got a contract working with all the Harris County gang intervention specialists here. So I started working with all the Harris County gang members, working with them in a cuffs unit, going from unit to unit, teaching young men how to avoid the prison lifestyle, doing a parenting workshop at the Catholic Diocese, teaching the parents on what to be aware of and look for gangs in the lifestyle of their children. If your child keep coming to you asking you to buy him red tennis, red shirt, red rag, red hat, that ought to give you a sign that he's a part of some lifestyle. So I was educating the parents on the different lifestyles to keep their children out of the gang lifestyle. I also, at that time, I was able to be called to help a state representative at the time to get elected to office on the grounds of the time, promote my program. And I appreciate Brother Boris Miles. He, gave me the opportunity to work with him for 10 years, and we set a program up in the Keegan State Jail, the first time offenders program, where we was going in every Wednesday for 12 years. I was teaching these brothers cognitive intervention, how to think while you there, so when you get out of here, you can be more prepared once you hit the streets on what you're going to be dealing with. So I started the cognitive intervention program in the Keegan State Jail. I eventually went on and started another program in the Harris County Jail on that same level, where we were working with all the brothers, the first offenders that was coming in now, teaching brothers that was first offenders how to get resources, who to connect with once he was released, how to get himself back in school. So we was working in the Harris County Jail with a bunch of brothers at that time. That program became successful. But over a period of time, Jeffrey, I found out in the area, and I've always had a problem with the thing Scared Straight. I'm saying, even though it was a great tactic at the time that was called, because I know that young black boys, especially in our community, fear only lasts temporarily. Mm-hmm. So I know using fear tactics with our young men in a lifestyle of survival, because I can go back to my young childhood, dealing with the trauma that was never treated. Mm-hmm. And that's what I found out dealing with young people, and my father, he never treated his trauma. Mm-hmm. And if you don't treat trauma, it grows into other things like bipolar. It grows into other things like depression. It grows into other things like, all kind of different diseases, high blood pressure. So when you deal with people that have trauma that's untreated, like most of the young men I deal with today, mm-hmm. that comes from, areas and neighborhoods to where they don't have the right kind of safe zones, the accurate love to treat trauma, because the greatest treatment of trauma is love and safety. Mm-hmm. And when you got to live a lifestyle thinking out the back of your head, fight, flight, or survival, you never have those safe zones in your neighborhood to where you could ever get to the reasoning part to deal with people on a reasonable level. So we're dealing with young people, and I asked myself, and I did a lot of study, because the new work that I went to and the training I went to, because after I figured out the prevention part is great, but we had to do some more in-depth study on how our recovery. And when I'm talking about being a recovery coach now, matter of fact, I'm a mental health specialist when it comes to peer recovery coach in the state of Texas, dealing with young people in the trauma informed when you approach a person in those areas. And I say to myself, when I go back looking at my father's lifestyle, my father, his father never was treated for the trauma, and it's called transgenerational trauma, the pain passed down through your genetic genes and your sperm cells that you suffer from what your great-grandfather suffered from and never got treated for it. And I tell people all the time, we see young men, and the young men that I deal with, you constantly you trying to figure out, why are this young man, he's doing great, he's living great, why is he so addicted to marijuana? Why is he always smoking weed? Marijuana have become a drug to deal with our pains that we can't talk about, especially dealing with men. I deal with young men, and most time in the group, because I'm an anger management counselor, most of the time the young men that I deal with from the ages of 13 to 21, I have to bring up a trigger. I have to bring up a trigger in the group to trigger their trauma, to get the emotions and get the feelings out of them. And once I trigger them in the group, everybody explodes, but I got to know how to tone de-escalate it, because it gets to a point, if you don't know how to de-escalate the trauma, you got all kind of chaos. Everybody want to fight, because I don't want you to talk about my daddy. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to talk about him. So we try to figure out, how do we work with these brothers that's dealing with the secrets of the pain that nobody ever wants to talk to them about.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about you, and then go back to you.
Okay.
You had this trauma.
Yes.
You were dealing with it in prison, forced you into isolation, to solitary confinement, should I say, for 4 years. You got out, you started reading books, autobiography of Malcolm X and all that stuff. But you still had that internal trauma.
Yes.
You still had the issues.
Yes.
How did you, or when did you deal with your trauma?
I forced myself to get engaged with AA, NA. I even took up a 10
What is that?
NA, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous.
Okay.
I was going through a lot of trainings, I was watching videos, even in prison. I was going to a different, with my AA, NA counselor. He was doing a lot of, when you was part of outreach, you did a lot of in-depth study. We did a 10-month plan of a doctor by the name of John Bradshaw that dealt with the 10 points of the family.
Did you know that you had trauma? Did you know what that you were dealing with this stuff inside? And that's, you say, if you forced yourself to go to AA and Narcotics Anonymous, but did you believe that was where you're gonna find answers?
No, I didn't. I knew I was dealing with some feelings that was uncomfortable with me. I knew I was quick to get angry, and I knew I had to do something about that. So I forced myself to get involved with programs that I wasn't interested in at the time, but these programs gave me the inside information on how to address those problems that I was dealing with.
So in essence, what I'm asking, and you just answered, is you didn't know that these organizations or these groups were going to help you find out what was going on, but as becoming a part of them, you were able to kind of have some sort of an insight as to, they're saying some things that I hadn't considered or thought about, and so maybe I need to look into this further.
Exactly. And again, and I started that Scared Straight, it put me in a position of power, and it put me in a position of purpose, because I was over other young people's lives, and I was given this great opportunity to give something back that I probably wish that I would have had at that time. Somebody speak to me. So it put me in a power of leadership. So as it put me in that power of leadership of trying to give back to young people, I forced myself to become more educated in the things that I didn't want to deal with. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to, one thing, I didn't want to deal with my pain and my feelings. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to keep that covered up in here.
So at that time, that you were being a leader to these young people doing Scared Straight, you still had this anger and pain.
Yes, I definitely did, because I had never dealt with it in a level, because I never opened up and talked to people about it, because in prison is the worst place to try to open up and show your feelings. You know what I'm saying? What's wrong? You got weak on them. So all these different things that men are afraid to deal with, especially in prison, dealing with other people that's got to survive on how other people look at you. So I was able to open up while I was there to show my true feelings, to give them the truth about what got me in prison, what my life is about. But I had to constantly get involved in programs that was in prison to teach me on what it was to deal with anger management, conflict resolution, de-escalation, you know what I'm saying? So how to connect with my feelings. So I went through some different trainings with a great 10-point plan I never forget him, in John Bradshaw. The 10-point plan on how to build a strong family. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, he dealt with every child, the mother, the father, and what we go through as children trying to build a family. And like I said, right now, and one of my motives is until we restructure the family lifestyle back together and go deep, like I said, on dealing with transgenerational trauma that have passed down to Black men. Like the last 3 months, we've been dealing with brotherhood breakfast, you know, because right now was an article come out in the Defender dealing with there's no way out for Black men. There's no way out because of our silence, living in silence, suffering in silence. Well, we are expressing, we don't know how to express our pain. We're afraid to express our pain because we're afraid to be judged by people that we live around every day. So we walk around, we pretending to be something that we're not because we're too masculine, macho to say, look here, brother, I'm hurting.
And I know you mentioned to me about the article that I wrote about
Right.
You're Not Alone.
You're not alone. Exactly.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
And how you've been using that as
a talking point to get brothers to look at. You know what I'm saying? Even though we know that, you know, we have to really get deep and understand, even though we know, like you said in your paper, you're saying Texas, here we are, we 50 out of 51 in the state on dealing with mental illness. You know what I'm saying? And we already know that we have one of the biggest mental institutions downtown Houston called the Harris County Jail. So, you know, we have to really break the stigmas of what mental illness is about. And men such as us, still gangsters. I'm still a gangster, but there's nothing wrong with me expressing to you that I'm going through pains. I got anxiety sometimes. You know what I'm saying? I deal with depression sometimes. But, you know, even as I go through my anxiety and depression, I got to let young people know how do I maneuver through that at times instead of bottling up my anger, bottling up my oppression, and taking it out on people that it don't belong to. Mm-hmm. How do you build up an avenue to give it out where you can sit down with somebody you comfortable with? Here I am, 62 years old, OG, but I still have somebody I can pick the phone up and say, look here, brother, I'm hurting. Mm-hmm. Brother, I'm in pain. I got those robbery thoughts are coming back to my mind. How do I? And the brother, you have to have somebody you're comfortable with that you can open up and express these feelings with, and move on to the next day.
That's not gonna judge.
That's not gonna judge you. You know what I'm saying? Meet you where you at. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, you have to build those kind of relationships up.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. You know, I was looking at the news yesterday. There's a press release at a press conference that was held yesterday. Mayor Turner and Chief Fenner, Troy Fenner, talked about the changing, seemingly the changing of crime in Houston. Yes. Now, I know 4 times we've reported, and here on Real Talk, we've talked about the uptick in crime over the last year. And last year around this time, there was 190 murders.
Right.
That number is now 187 this year, which is a decrease.
Right.
I mean, it's still a significant number.
Yes.
It's still a significant number.
Right.
But it you know, as much as we criticize, we also have to acknowledge.
Exactly.
You know, there are some positives here.
Right.
That's about a 3% decrease. And then I looked at the other numbers. Out of the 4 violent crime categories, murder being number 1, robberies was down 14% this time. Rape down 33% this time from last year, and aggravated assault down 9% this time. So I know that they have the new program that they've instituted in Houston to try to address it. I think they devoted something like $50 million or something to it. But I know that that's kind of a Band-Aid. Right. And it really doesn't deal with the stuff that you're talking about in full, because the mental illness or mental health preventative health thing it's going to take some time. Right. It's not an easy fix. Right. It's not a microwave situation. Right. So what are your thoughts on the changing of the crime situation? And then, you know, what do you feel we could do a lot better?
You know, I'm glad you asked me that question. You know, I've been fighting the city, fighting the county, fighting the state. I've sat at every politician's desk, shook every politician's hand. I've been on the streets like I said, for the last 30 years, I've dealt with not only the young people, I dealt with their daddies and I dealt with their granddaddies through the juvenile probation department, through the probation department. I've worked with a lot of these people on the street. Don't nobody know Sunnyside and Southport best that I do, dealing with families and family structures out there, especially dealing with the mindset of the young men. If we don't go back, what I've been trying to do, California put it together. It was called Homeboys Inc. in California, with Preacher did that, where you got all these intakes of people that's dealing with trauma. Trauma just don't go away; it'll settle in, but it's going to eventually show itself one other way. So when we know that if we gonna get this thing together, we can't police our way out of this here. We tried that in the 70s, in the 90s. We have to rebuild families and build wraparounds and how to restructure families. When you have brothers with lived experience, that some of the brothers that's coming out the institution destroyed their community. What we tried to do and what I've been imposing on this city is all these buildings. I got young men that I could bring in and train them on how to deal with their feelings and how we deal with trauma. Trauma-informed training centers to where we can express ourselves other ways than violence. Because if you see the last couple of weeks, the 18-year-old that went up in Buffalo, you know what I'm saying? The 18-year-old that went into school. These are people with undeveloped minds, but if you see how their life is, one of the brothers had a live streamer on his gun going in Buffalo. If you look at the live stream, it look in the same way that they sit down up on these video games all day long.
Tour Duty.
Tour Duty, Grand Theft Auto, it's the same thing. Imagining an underdeveloped mind that's living in poverty, living in trauma, living in stressful household. Hurt people.
Yeah, because the young man who shot up the kids, the elementary kids, before he did that, he shot his grandmother in the face.
Hey,
his grandmother in the face.
These are the same images you see on these games that these young people play all day long. But again, I'm not gonna blame it on the game. We have to restructure family structures to where men have to be in the schools. We have to be in these schools to educate our young men on how to avoid violent behavior, how to develop yourself mentally to overcome. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, it can be done. I got a proven track record. I can get on the phone right now and call at least 10 young brothers that can transform their life into being strong, developed men. Off of the work that they've seen me do and the work that I've put them involved in, connected them with the right people. So we have to put in these neighborhoods that we have to put trauma centers. When these brothers come out these Harris County jails, when they come out to jail, they got to come to us before you go to my neighborhood, because we're going to put some criteria on you. We're going to give you some skills. We're going to reload your toolbox on how to survive when you get out there, because a growling stomach don't eat. And when I went, not mentally, because we know that 80% of the inmates that's in Harris County Jail got what you call dyslexia, got a reading disorder. Grown men reading at a 4th and 5th grade level. So when you're reading at a disadvantage, a handicap advantage, and we know this here in the Harris County Jail and the prisons that brothers have reading disorders, we got to feed that monster, because again, once they're released out, they're going to give that negative energy on somebody else. So we have to set up trauma centers, brothers that they feel comfortable with, and make it feel safe and loving. How do we get safety and love back in our community? Because that's the only thing settles trauma.
But you have some situations, man, where you have those that do care about the community, that are seeking to provide safety and love.
Right.
But, when that person is dealing with, I saw a situation where this female pastor.
Right.
I'm sure you saw that story where the man killed her.
Right.
Murdered her, and she was trying to provide counseling and help to him. So there's a lot deeper rooted situation, man, and it's like it's for many people it's very, very scary.
Right. Yeah.
It's very, very nerving. Right. For them to want to even help people. Right. And provide some sort of comfort and assistance.
Jeff, you said something. In that prison, awareness became bigger in my lifestyle, and to be aware is to mean to be safe, because you have to know your environment. So therefore, by me having living experience that a lot of people don't have, I can go in a room and I can sense different people in their behavior. Your energy will tell me to watch you. So we've been gifted with an insight. Everybody got to know their roles in the people you deal with. So I got to know. I know, and I'm skillful at dealing with young men coming out of jail, because for the last 40 years, I have molded my life, conditioned myself to know when you coming to me with something that just ain't true, bro. That ain't true.
Mhm.
And they know, because they know. So they come at you with a different approach when they know you can call them out because you see them before they even get your way. So sometimes we get in the areas and in the lanes we just ain't supposed to be in. You have to have skillful brothers with lived experience that know the energy of the brothers coming out of jail to know how to call them out on their behavior.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And when you call them out on their behavior, just like me, when I'm in my group with my young people, they know to keep it real because they know I'm going to bring them and put them on the spot and the rest of the people. So long as we speaking truth about what we dealing with and what we're going through, we're doing healing.
Mhm.
And that's what we want to get brothers at healing, to build his self-esteem up, to look at the world in a different angle. And that's what I say about all the time when I deal with young people. They say, what do you feel like you do when you deal with young people? If I can leave a seed where they can look at the world a different way than they did before I gave them a message,
Mhm.
to get that seed to go to planting and leave my information to where I got a 24-hour hotline to where when they need me to ask me questions, I'm open that for them. We got to have brothers in place in the community. Like I said all the time, I know that if we wanted the schools to be safe, I know some brothers would definitely protect the schools.
Yeah.
And you would have to, and people would answer before you get there. You know not to go to that school.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? They gonna protect the school. The kids gonna know that these brothers love them, and ain't nobody gonna go in that zone because they know that school is protected. But again, when you're strong, you speak truth to power, you become what they call a community threat. Like me, you know what I'm saying? Somebody say I talk too much,
Mhm.
so they don't really want me in the building because I don't know when to shut up. You know what I'm saying? So, but when we got to bring brothers out to when you speak truth to power, you call people out, and like again, when young people know that you love them, they will gravitate. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mhm.
As young people, they don't care how much. They don't care nothing about no doctor's degree, no master's degree. They don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. Then you can make some change in their life. They open up, and that's what we got to do. How do we get our young people to open up so we as elderly can give them the tools to go on to be productive citizens? I'm a living example.
Mhm.
After doing 20 years, been out 27 years. You know, I'm the supervisor at Unlimited Vision Behavior Health. I got 7 people work for me. You know what I'm saying? I do trainings. I'm in the jails. I'm in the schools. I'm constantly on the ground training brothers. I'm always on the phone giving people information on how to get themselves on a different track. But my issue is until the community starts supporting people that have a connection to the ground to get the work done, I can get a lot more work done if I had a lot more support.
Yeah. I was gonna say that what you just brought up, because you said a lot. A lot of people, and that's why I'm always gonna stay connected to the hood, to the neighborhoods where I grew up in South Park, Third Ward, and any hood. Really, to be honest, I'm gonna go to, the Haverstocks and whatever. To make sure I'm staying connected and grounded, because we can get our titles, our degrees, our and we have grown accustomed to that flight.
Yes.
We want to leave for better conditions. And that's not a bad thing. To want to be in safe neighborhoods. But these kids, these elderly, they want to be in safe neighborhoods too.
Exactly.
But they are in a war zone in many cases, and it's all kind of this like a hamster wheel that they're on, and it's like they can't escape it. And if they do get out of it, it's kind of like watching a daily episode of Good Times, where they always was trying to get out of the ghetto. They was always trying, and then every time it seemed like they was about to get out, something happened.
Exactly.
And I think that many people who are dealing with this criminal element and dealing with these issues that are impacting our communities, man. They're left to fend for themselves. And those who got an opportunity to get away, many of them don't come back. And if they do come back, they come back, kind of like philanthropist, if you will,
looking down,
and looking down, like I'm coming to give you something, but I look at who I am, look at me, and I think that, to your point, people do not know how much you care. They don't care nothing about how much you know. They need to know that you love them and that you care for them, not just because you gave them a hot meal, but what are you doing to try to help them internally? Are you trying to improve their lot in life? You know, and some people don't want to help. Some people don't want assistance, and you can't do anything about that. But there are a lot of people who want to be helped. They
And
want to escape.
and I say that all the time. You know, I deal with thousands of young men, and you know, they don't want to live their life, but a lot of times they're forced to live the life. Because again, to live and wake up in some of these areas around town to where you hear gunshot all night, you walk in the neighborhood, you being judged and sized up all day, and then you some of the schools that they go to, they get dumbed down in some of these schools. So a lot of times, a lot of the young men they're hopeless. You know what I'm saying? I dealt with the gang intervention program, the gang injunction, where they had me set up with 90 brothers that was deemed to not go back in their neighborhood for 2 years. You go back in your neighborhood for life. They were deemed for life. And they had me over working with these brothers, man. I've got these brothers, anger management. I got these brothers together, got their life on track. You know what I'm saying? They made promises to them. And when we make promises to these brothers that's on the street trying to get themselves out of that, to prove to themselves and prove to the community that they can live a better life. And then when the community turn their back on these brothers, once they win in the court, you know what I'm saying? And you made promises that you're going to keep them going, they lose confidence in you.
Yeah, overall.
And then it's hard to get them back on to believing that you're going to be for real with them. So we have to be honest. We got to step out on faith. We got to restructure the church.
You know, I'm glad you said that. We got a couple of minutes left. I was going to say, and I'm so glad that you joined us today, Brother Gordon, because, you're very authentic, you're real, and not only your story is inspiring, but the fact that you still here on the ground working with those that need our assistance is important. I remember, I hadn't always wore these suits.
Right.
A lot of people, really don't know my story. They think that, oh, you Jeff Boney, or you this, or council member, or 4 times, or businessman, entrepreneur, former banker, whatever. But they don't know the real story behind me. And if they really knew who I was before all of this, But I think back on one particular day. It was a Sunday morning, and me and my partners was on the block on Crest Ridge and Southtown Street.
Right.
I was on Southtown Street in South Park, right off MLK. And we was on the block, man, and we had a discussion that morning about God and about, what's our purpose in life, and, why we here, and, you think that, there's a better way for us, man, and you think God gonna change our path and whatever. And some of my partners, man, had, been arrested several times, and I was a juvenile, so I got caught up in the juvenile situation, but I never was, tried or charged an adult on stuff. But, I felt like I can get away with some things.
Right.
But this couple passed by in a Lincoln Town car. Black folks used to drive them Lincoln.
Big Lincoln, yeah.
And one of the ladies, the lady in the car, she had on her church hat,
right,
with the big feather and everything. And the man was dressed up in his suit. And I remember them looking over at me, and she pointed over at us.
Right.
And then they was just like shaking their head.
Right.
And that situation never left me. Matter of fact, I wrote about this.
Right.
In my book, and called "Don't Argue with Me." And I talk about the fact that they didn't know that we was actually talking about God and change and how we could better our lives.
Right.
And they could have stopped their Lincoln Town car and got out in their fancy dress and came and talked to us about God and changing our lives, but they didn't.
Right.
Yeah. And so we got to have people like you on the ground, Brother Gordon, that's impacting our lives, that's not afraid to stop their car, whether it's a Lincoln or whether it's or whatever it is, and coming and holler at those that are needed. So, man, I thank you for your work.
Well, I appreciate it, but I want to say this one thing. I couldn't do this work if I didn't have a powerful sister in my life that back and support me by the name of Rita White. You know what I'm saying? When you get a good, strong woman in your life that back and support you, even though you do dangerous work dealing with the lifestyle that they know that's dangerous, but when you done gave your life to God to do this kind of work to change life because God gave you some blessings, this work cannot be done unless you got a strong woman got your back to do this work on the street.
All right, Rita White.
Rita White.
All right, shout out to you, Rita White, for helping him continue to do his work, man. I thank you so much for being on Real Talk Junkies on today, man. That'll do it, guys, for the day. Real Talk Junkies. Of course, we're gonna have OG1 back, man, on future shows, man, because I love his insight and his passion for the youth as well as this community. We're gonna get up out of here, y'all. Check us out next Wednesday, 12 noon Central Standard Time. Real Talk Junkies. Let's go.